We love Zencaster because it allows us to record the audio for our podcast and create the video segments we use for our weekly Sister Scoop episodes. Zencaster has helped us make content capture simple.
It's now super easy to record a podcast with Zencaster. Log in using your browser and start recording a high-quality podcast right away. Record studio quality sound and up to 4K video with your guests, and feel a sense of zen knowing Zencaster's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable.
If you've thought about podcasting before and realized that you need a lot of different tools and services, those days are over. With Zencaster's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast in one place and distribute it to Spotify, Apple, and other major destinations.
Just go to zencastr.com/pricing and use our code SistersAssembled, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencaster paid plan. We want you to have the same easy experiences we do for all of our podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story.
Katie and I are always hungry, and one snack we both love is beef jerky. That's why we're so excited to tell you about one of our favorite jerky brands, Matt Hat Jerky.
Matt Hat's delicious taste makes it a great snack, and the variety of flavors, including original, black truffle, and my personal favorite, roasted garlic, means there's a flavor for everyone. Plus, it's local to the area where we grew up in, which we just love.
Use the link in the show notes below to get some Matt Hat Jerky for yourself, and make sure to use our coupon code SistersAssembled for 10% off. Hello and welcome to Sisters Assembled, your home for all things MCU. And we have one more episode dedicated to Captain America Brave New World because there's a lot of new content coming, but we'll get to that later in the episode. So this episode, we decided to break out a little bit more about the Hulk-related characters in Brave New World because there was so much we had to talk about in our immediate reactions that we felt that this warranted its own episode. So, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Kate, and she's going to kick us off with our Everything About the Hulk's style episode from Brave New World.
Yeah, I mean, let's just get into the whole premise of this, because if you listen to our predictions and you listen to our reactions, I mean, in our predictions, we straight up were saying, and I said it, I clipped it for a social post. I said, listen, if I was Marvel, I would have the leader be saved for a Hulk project, and I would have Sidewinders be what is going to be the big antagonist in this movie. Then when you listen to our reactions, I mean, part of why we kind of felt a little split about this entire film was it didn't feel fully like a Captain America film. It had its moments. It had Sam in it. We still followed him. He was clearly still our protagonist, but the entire plot was based off of pretty much all of the events that happened in The Incredible Hulk, making it an unofficial sequel. And so I think you have so much to go off of regarding especially the leader here. And that's why we had to break this out so much, because all these are still on the board. And that is something I said in the reactions. You still have Red Hulk sitting there in the raft. You have the leader sitting there in the raft. They are both on the board. They are not off. They have not been defeated. I mean, obviously, Harrison Ford and his Red Hulk is a little bit more of a complication. They're not meant to be defeated per se, but you could see that they're still being saved for a future Hulk-related project. I also just want to add, because I don't know if it's going to come up naturally, but I want to say it quick in the beginning of the episode. When I was kind of looking into some of this, they considered pulling in Mark Ruffalo's Hulk. They considered having him in this movie and then chose not to. So let's keep that in mind too when we're talking about this, because this is all things Hulk from Captain America Brave New World, and we almost had him cameo in the film.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up about Mark Ruffalo, because I think we did talk about, it being really more of a sequel to The Incredible Hulk than a Captain America movie. Everything that you just said was so spot on. And I think that is even more evidenced by the fact that they were going to have him come in. I mean, in terms of that actual decision, I kind of feel a little bit torn, because on one hand, it was a glaring hole in the film not to have the Hulk, who is the reason that both of these characters, the leader and the Red Hulk, exist in the forms that they do, because regardless of Thaddeus Ross's experimentation, he never would have been the Hulk or the Red Hulk had Bruce Banner not turned into the original Hulk. And had, the leader not interacted with him, he wouldn't have the same powers that he has. So the Hulk is really the originator of both of these two characters, and I think that was a glaring a glaring spot in this film that was missing to not have that character. On the other hand, that would have then taken more away from Sam. So I appreciate that they were in some ways trying to keep that focus on him, but it is a little bit of like a, well, you kind of danced around the whole point of the plot when you made the leader and the Red Hulk the true antagonistic pair of the film.
I think that right there is where you just put the pin in it. You just made the point of the entire film. And listen, guys, again, you can listen to our reactions if you haven't already. The movie itself was enjoyable. I enjoyed watching it. I enjoyed the acting. I thought that was great. But I think, unfortunately, in our opinion, it was overshadowed by the entirety of the Hulk storyline. And I think Taylor just put the nail in the coffin right there by being torn about whether or not Mark Ruffalo should have been in this movie. Because quite frankly, Mark Ruffalo should have been, and it shouldn't have been a Captain America movie then.
Yeah.
That is the statement. I think there were very interesting political aspects, like the entire thing with adamantium. I think you could have done the entire movie, honestly, based around that.
Yes.
I think there's so much going on, and it's a Captain America film. This would not be the first time it was entirely around a political idea. I think that would have been your right move, is having the political aspect of it, Captain America involved. Yes, we could still have played around with the Red Hulk thing if we needed to, but we did talk about the film being a little too busy. Quite frankly, you could have had Sidewinder in it more, had him and his guys kind of meddling. The leader didn't need to be the one doing it. They could have been. And we could have had really it all come down to that. I think you said in the reactions, Taylor, you thought that scene with Japan and America kind of doing their little skirmish, you thought that could have been the final scene.
Yeah.
I don't disagree. But that's not what happened. And therefore, you did take a sequel to The Incredible Hulk and make it without The Incredible Hulk. And so I do think that's really down to the issue. And so now I think it opens the door of, like I said, the leader is still on the board. So is Red Hulk. Obviously, we have our Hulk still around. We have She-Hulk. We have Abomination.
And Hulk's son.
Yeah. I choose to forget that little bit because I don't know
So
where that's
random.
going. Yeah. And that was weird. And I just, it's fine. I don't need to think about it. But so including him though, you have 6 Hulk related characters on the table. And I think where this is going to get interesting as we have this discussion is going to be, clearly the leader is still going to have to play a role here. We've rehabilitated Abomination.
Yeah.
Like, he's not going to be out here trying to smash up Harlem again. I don't see the Hulk going AWOL. We have Harrison Ford's or Thaddeus Ross out here trying to control his version of the Hulk, of his Red Hulk. She-Hulk's chillin'. Clearly the leader is still going to be that final chess piece of needing to be the villain, which is why I think we're going to sit here and go, why'd we do this in Captain America when we're going to have to do it again in a Hulk film if that's what they're setting up?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, it all just comes down to the fact that this film, like, I don't know who rolled up to this writer's room and said, hey guys, let's do a film that's a Captain America film. Let's include the Red Hulk as president and leader as the primary villain. To go back to what you were saying about what would have made this a better film for just a second, if they had just done the adamantium storyline, and if they didn't want to fully put the Serpent Society as the number one villain, swap in the leader for the power broker, someone who already exists in the Captain America circle, that has yet to be resolved. That's a huge blow to Sam in terms of betrayals.
And we found out about her in the last place we just saw Sam, which is the Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Exactly. So I guess I just don't know who thought that bringing in all of these characters from a different and look, we are always talking about making connections, but the connections need to be smart and the connections need to be intentional. And this felt incredibly random. Like, yes, he's already interacted with Ross for sure, right? Sam and Ross, they go toe to toe in Civil War. Sam even mentions, you spent a long time hunting us, and they have a relationship. It's not a good one, but they have one. Yet it does not make sense at this time, or did it make sense at this time, to turn him into the Red Hulk, have the leader, when that should have been done in a Hulk focused film. Captain America has his own pantheon of people, characters in his circle or tangential to his circle that would have made so much more sense. He is a inherently political character because of who he is and what he stands for, the mantle itself, regardless of who is wearing it. And that is just, it is very frustrating because then you're left in this place where you're right. We've already used the leader in a Captain America film where it just does not make sense to use him. Now he needs to potentially come into a Hulk franchise that has not had a film focused on this character in, let me do the math, 25 minus 8, 17 years. Yet they just had this quasi sequel that involved almost all of the characters. They even brought Betty back. So, like, where are we going here? Because that character, though he hasn't had, his own film, The Incredible Hulk hasn't had his own film since 2008. That character has made, 5 or 6 different appearances since then? He has evolved so much beyond where these characters knew him from that I don't even know how you begin to integrate them back into that universe with him or that franchise and coalesce it back into one coherent franchise the way it was probably ideated to be. Like, they're so far apart at this stage.
I agree. I think that's where moving forward, looking forward, and putting the focus here on this, that is where I'm getting lost. I think if you take out that this was a Captain America film and we take away this thought process, it was quite interesting to see the leader come after, obviously, Ross. I think it was extremely interesting how he didn't know he was making him Red Hulk. That was a great piece, in my opinion.
Very well done.
I think, again, if you take out why we were actually there at the theater, I enjoyed it as a sequel for what it was.
Yeah.
I think I do just have to add, I hate the leader's design. Why did we not go comic book accurate?
With the big brain. I don't want to see his, brain matter.
Why do you look like that?
Yeah.
Why do you look like that? I was like, ew. Like, the gamma stuff and the blood and all that didn't make his, skull disappear. Like, I was like, what are we doing?
Also, not to be this person, but in some of the scenes where especially he's in those people's house after he brutally murders them, which was just kind of a lot. In that scene where he's watching the dogfight on television, the makeup is bad. He looks like they missed some pieces where they were supposed to have painted him, and it looks like really bad stage makeup. And I was like, that was a choice.
See, honestly, that's how I felt like it looked the whole time. Like, it just didn't look right. And I was like, you're telling me you could... okay, I'm all for practical effects when we can do them, but I'm like, you're telling me you couldn't have just mega-minded this? Like, what is the issue with that? Like,
well, even if you think about some of the prosthetics, think about Tony's prosthetic on his chest, right? They did that for how many movies? You're telling me you can't make that man's skull a little bit bigger and put a wig on it? These are some of the best makeup artists in the world. Why did we choose this particular design? It's atrocious.
No, I hated it. It was really bad. And I had a bad feeling when they would show his shadow, and I was like, why does he not have a big brain?
I know. I was like, why is his head not big enough?
Yeah, I was like, why does he still look human? And then they did the weird glowing eyes too, and I was like, what is happening?
Yeah.
Anyway, that's not important. But what I was saying was, I do think the story between the two is really interesting because I think it's actually a big miss with Abomination that we never got that.
Yeah.
So I think they made up for it with the leader. And they also added this whole storyline that, we didn't have from The Incredible Hulk. Obviously, from that movie, it was after the Abomination sort of forced his hand, made him make him into what he was. And then he got hit, blood got into a cut, and that's how we saw that happen. That's the last we saw of him.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have really had that connection with Ross if they didn't fill in the blanks, which I think they did a really good job of doing in this movie. Sitting there and saying, no, instead of turning him in or whatever else they could have done, Ross was like, hey, you're going to be my personal little puppet because now you're like a genius and you're going to help me make all these decisions. And I think it was great because it again proves, and I think it proved to Sam again, that it was like, this guy's not great.
Yeah.
Ross wants to sit here and act like he's turning over a new leaf, and maybe he is, but look what he did for the past, 17 years to this man. And so I thought the whole revenge plot, while again, not sure why it was happening in a Captain America movie, was great.
Yeah, I
I really
agree.
did. Because again, I think you could have played the same cards with Abomination, but they did a different route with him. So they made it work with the leader, and it did.
I totally agree. I think that was very strong writing for a different movie. I think there were two different movies happening here.
Yeah.
And when we talked about the busyness, that's what it comes down to. You had a strong plot for a Captain America film if you subbed in a few characters. You had a strong plot for a Hulk sequel if you subbed in a few characters. And you're right, one of the strengths was that revenge piece. Side note, I do think it's very fascinating that if he was using the leader, Ross was using the leader as his own personal think tank, that the leader signed off on the Sokovia Accords and thought that that was a good idea.
That. I was just thinking that.
My question is, was he trying to sabotage Ross by saying, oh, you should do this? The statistical, whatever calculations he does in his head, it sounds like it's mathematical, like statistics based on whatever probabilities. Oh, like the probability is this. Or is it that the Avengers are so, like, there's such variables that he did not account for that? Because he even talks about in this film, like, oh, there was an 89% chance that you were going to go back if I put Isaiah's life in danger and you didn't. You're an anomaly. I wonder if the Avengers are also an anomaly in that way.
I will also, though, just point out here, part of the failure of the Sokovia Accords then came from everything that happened with Thanos.
But if he could see, I thought about that, but if he could see the probabilities of the multiverse, how could he not see the probabilities of Thanos?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, I'm sure he probably could, but maybe not to that extent. And even then, maybe he didn't, maybe it was just not a factor to think that they were going to bring them back. You know, I think there were because if you really think about the probabilities and all of this, there are so many factors that he has to factor in to sit there and say the Sokovia Accords wouldn't have worked. For what they were worth, well, obviously we're Team Cap here and we don't agree with them. Theoretically, they would have worked. Like, I mean, we even see them happening in the Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man right now. Like,
Yeah.
we are actively watching the Sokovia Accords be a factor. They would have worked for what they were supposed to do. Do I agree with them? No. I don't agree with them for a second, but I understood where they were trying to come from. I think in the long run, to try and factor in that Thanos was not only going to happen, but then they were going to go back in time, undo it, then have a fight with him again. Like, I think that's hard to factor in really all of that to say, no, these are not going to work in the long run. I just think, like, how do you predict that?
Well, he's supposed to be Mr. Man when it comes to the math.
I mean, yes, but maybe the numbers were not, like, maybe that was just because think about, like, other universes. Now that we have the multiverse, we can kind of run open this door. Other universes, Tony doesn't decide to accidentally solve time travel one night. You know what I mean?
Well, and the thing too, what I was thinking about is, what is it, 5 million eventualities? Wasn't that the number?
And they only won in one.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so, like, maybe statistically, that's like a less than 1% chance that they win. And if you think about the Sokovia Accords and the repeal, they don't go super deep into it, but I think we can, extrapolate that the reason that they were repealed is because of the groundswell of good faith, not even good faith, good, like, vibes towards the Avengers, because they brought people back, because the vast majority of people were happy that that happened. Sure, you have the minority who are like, Thanos was right, like, whatever, but I would say the vast majority of people were happy that their loved ones came back and that, life resumed in some semblance of normalcy. And so if you think about, there was a less than 1% chance that the Avengers would ever do that, thereby reversing the sentiment around the Sokovia Accords, because people wanted them. After kind of those missteps that we all saw that Ross laid out in his little speech to them, the sentiment was decidedly turning negative. And I don't know that maybe the leader ever saw the idea that them winning, because it was such an infinitesimal, probability, would flip that sentiment and then have them repealed. So I do think that makes sense, but it definitely is something that was in the back of my mind. I was like, that means that the whole time that Ross was was doing the Sokovia Accords and hunting down the Avengers and was going, full speed ahead on this, he had the leader in his back pocket basically saying, yes, this is the right choice statistically.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can open it even bigger to where you're thinking and think about anything that Ross did in the 17 years since he was introduced to us in the Incredible Hulk. I think that opened such an interesting door, including going after Black Widow and going after that trio and making Captain America a fugitive. Like, these are all decisions that were clearly played out.
Yeah.
Like, that's what we're now knowing, is that we sat here and the leader was figuring out the probability of XYZ and how that would make them look. At the end of the day, the Sokovia Accords, yes, is what was the impetus to a lot of that. And it made Ross look great.
Yeah.
It made him look amazing, especially after, I love that random little press conference that they were like having him crash out at in the past. I was like, what?
So funny.
What is
And
happening?
Put the mustache
I know.
on Harrison Ford.
I was like, what are we doing? But like, clearly he had some mixed opinions, some of it going all the way back to what happened in Harlem.
Yeah.
And we saw how the Sokovia Accords really boosted him forward.
Yeah.
And so I think it's interesting when you look at some of the effects of it and some of the other things he had his hands in, knowing that there was a man sitting here doing the probability and working it all out for him to be like, yes, if you make Captain America fugitive, you have like a 37% chance of losing support here. But you have like a 70-something% chance of winning support here. And then it's like, it's so interesting. Or even just in this movie, what was the probability and the factor for having him reassemble the Avengers?
Yeah.
That's my question. Because now that we know that that was probably the person, I mean, and let's just put out there, we are not taking away that Ross had these ideas and wanted to do these things, but he is now going to an essential think tank and being like, what would work? Would this work? Is this worthwhile?
Is this going to blow up in my face, or is this going to make me that much more popular?
Right. Is this going to work in my favor? And so when you factor that in, I'm so curious to see why he wanted the Avengers assembled.
Yeah. I mean, it is such a good question. I think one of the other things that you don't want to forget, and this gets to kind of what we've been trying to get at here, which is like, where do these characters go, coming out of this film? You mentioned a few times they're still on the board, they're in the raft. Let's be honest, a raft is not going to hold a Red Hulk if he transforms. I have a question about the Red Hulk in general, and we'll get to that in a second, but I want to keep this train of thought before I lose it. You have a Red Hulk who, yes, the raft is in the middle of nowhere, but we saw that man practically fly. So all he has to do is a big old jump over the water. He'll be fine.
Well, and to be fair, like, Captain America discreetly let all his guys out, and then they got out.
It's not impenetrable. I'm not thinking that he is in the raft because he feels like he deserves to be there, and he is intentionally not breaking out. The leader is in the raft because he also wants to be there. Because if you think about that man, he was in a super max type prison in basically solitary confinement in that lab with hundreds of guards, and he basically mind controlled them to let him have the run of the place. And he could have done that at any point, but he was trying to earn his freedom from Ross. They had their little deal, and it wasn't until Ross reneged on the deal that he was like, all right, bet, now I'm coming out and I'm going to wreak havoc on your life because I've been here because I wanted to be here this whole time. The raft is the same. He can get out of there at any point. He has the ability to change the minds of the guards. He can make them do whatever he wants. He is there because he wants to be there. Do I know why? No. But the other question that I have is, the other person he has a relationship with that we have not broached yet is Bruce Banner. They had a very positive relationship, right? He was helping him out. There was no antagonism there. Like, I don't think that Bruce ever did anything to him to really, make him feel like he needed revenge other than to bring him into this thing that ended up kind of blowing up his life. Is there a play there for the leader to try to get revenge on Bruce Banner? And he feels like the most statistically relevant way for him to do so is to reassemble the Avengers, a team in which Bruce is a known member at certain times in his life. Is that his, for lack of better term, endgame there is to find Bruce? Because remember, Bruce, after Endgame, he kind of goes a little like, I don't even know what he does, really. Like, nobody really talks about him. He just shows up in She-Hulk and is like, hi, I'm here now, for like a few episodes, and then he like goes off to Sakaar and like goes and gets his random son.
Well, he was also in the Shang-Chi end credit. Don't forget that from 4 years ago.
Oh my gosh. No, that's a good point. So he is still a known Avenger. He is still involved. So if that's the case, then he is certainly someone who Sam would go to reassemble, because he's been covertly acting as an Avenger this whole time. Now, I don't doubt that the leader knows that, because that man knows a lot of things. He's a genius and he has access to probably the full government surveillance of the US government, because that's probably the type of information that he needed to be able to make the statistical calculus that Ross was asking him to do. If that's the case, and now he knows he can get Bruce Banner out in the open, should he choose to enact revenge on him and that becomes, part of the next film that Bruce is in, maybe that's the end game. I don't know. I'm just trying to start to connect the dots, because I do think we need to connect Bruce back to his own dang franchise, because the rest of his characters are all there waiting for him.
I think you make a lot of points, and I'm going to first start by saying I think it's a stretch for it to be the Avengers as the solution, only because we know what's coming. So that being said, we're not going to get it. If we're going to get a Hulk film, it's not going to be before Doomsday and Secret Wars. It will have to be after. One, because it's not even on the slate, and two, because supposedly we're getting Doomsday like in the next year or two. That's not going to happen. But supposedly that is what is slated. I also think for terms of the actual storyline, I just don't see them making the leader an Avengers level threat.
No. I'm sorry. I want to just clarify my theory there. I think he's using the Avengers to draw Bruce out for them to have a fight, not necessarily for the leader to be an Avengers threat, but because Bruce has not really been operating in the open, if that makes sense. So it's more for to bring him back out into the world in an open way so that he can find him and do whatever he needs to do to enact his revenge, not with Bruce as an Avenger, but as a solo film. I don't know if that helps, but I do just want to clarify kind of what I meant there.
I hear you. I think there's just too many steps there. I think for what they would need to do, there's too many steps to get him there. I think you made actually the point of Bruce technically did nothing to this man.
Yeah.
He was helping him, to what you said. And unfortunately, if my memory serves correctly, the guy who is the Abomination, whose name I don't currently remember off the top of my head,
Emil Blonsky,
yes, ends up finding him and is like, make me him. I'm fighting him. And, that's how that all goes down. And it's his fault. He becomes the leader. Obviously, then the Hulk goes on to fight Abomination. Well, here's the thing. Here's how I would see this playing out in the best of ways. Is the Abomination is supposedly at peace, right? That is supposedly where we left him at the end of She-Hulk. But I could see the leader wanting to enact revenge on him. And if he's turned around to the good, now let's just play into we're pulling all the pieces in. Let's just supposedly say we're pulling all the pieces in. Well, She-Hulk is besties with him. She likes him. They've had their little whatever. She's fine with him. Well, she's out here with her cousin. Hey, help him. This weirdo dude's trying to come after him. Now that brings Bruce into the fold. That's how I would see this playing out in the best case scenario. Obviously, there are writers on this planet that are meant to make that way better than how I just said it. But that's the general gist of how I could see it going. You have not taken a single Hulk character off of the board in 17 years. That's crazy to say.
Yeah.
But it's a fact. The reason for that is because they physically could not make the Hulk film due to rights up until 3 years ago, 4 years ago?
Something like that.
So that being a factor, well, they want all these pieces on the board. I guess the leader's the solution, unless we're going into bigger territory and the leader ends up being part of the team. That's the other option. Is he going to be a villain in the future? The Abomination was supposedly a one-movie villain, but then they brought him back to be kind of a chill dude. You don't really know. He could be an ally moving forward. I mean, we thought he could be in the Thunderbolts. Obviously, he's not going to be, but could they be keeping the leader on the board to be an ally? Is that possible?
I mean, it's not impossible. We've definitely we have an entire group of people who were once villains who are, now acting as heroes. And not all of those, I don't want to say that because I actually don't know everybody's comic book full storylines. I was going to say not all of those heroes actually make that choice in the comics. So I don't want to say that definitively. But what I will say is it's possible. The other thing that just sparked when we're talking about She-Hulk is we talked in our predictions episode about bringing back the Intelligentsia, which was introduced in She-Hulk, which the leader is for lack of better term, like a leader of that organization. And if memory serves, there are guys like Doom who were a part of that as well. So it's literally like a think tank of villains. And I do wonder if, like, because we already have that particular organization on the board, and Marvel loves nothing more than they love a good evil organization, if maybe that becomes something that he either is already involved in and is kind of working in the background and has been since Ross screwed him over, or if, in his new cushy spot in the raft, because you can't tell me that man isn't communicating with the outside world. I 100% think he is. If he discovers this group who already hates She-Hulk and, clearly has some thoughts about some gamma radiated folks, if he is able to use his superior intelligence to rise in the ranks of that organization and then become a leader. Man, this is so annoying that his name is the leader, because like now I can't use that word without it being like a full on pun. But without, being the person in charge of that group, there we go. And using that resource or those resources to enact whatever his next step is. So that is the other thing I do want to bring up with him, is because he has that comic book precedent as a leader of that organization, and they're already existing canonically within the MCU in maybe a slightly different iteration than maybe we've seen in the comics.
Yeah, I think there's a lot on the board here. That question for me is it ever going to happen?
I know.
Because again, quite frankly, you turned a sequel to The Incredible Hulk into a cat film, which, okay, that happened. We can move on from that point. But Bruce Banner has yet to have, well, Mark Ruffalo hasn't even had a film.
Yeah.
But Bruce Banner as a character has yet to have his own film since 2008.
Yeah.
And so now you do have all these players, these Hulk players on the board, and there's just no room for them, which is concerning. And then you also, not to go down this route, but then you supposedly have the mutants coming in the next saga. So then it's like, there's still no room.
Well, and the other thing that I think we've been kind of dancing around as we talked about the evolution of the Hulk is he's not the Hulk that, you stereotypically think of. This is an evolved Hulk who is completely in control of himself in his Hulk form.
Do we think that's going to remain after Secret Wars?
It cannot. It simply cannot, in order for some of these storylines. We've talked about World War Hulk a million times, brought that up as one of the larger Hulk storylines, but you cannot have an evolved Bruce Banner at this, like the Professor Hulk type evolved Bruce Banner Hulk combo, and do that storyline. That's not going to work. So I think that's why I bring this up, is like that is a huge roadblock, is the choices that they've made to evolve this character over the years. They're just not going to work. Then you think about the other glaring thing is, and I don't mean to be ageist, but Mark Ruffalo's like either approaching his 50s or in his 50s. If you think about his age contemporary, RDJ, yes, he's coming back as Doom, but that's not exactly the same level of like physicality sort of as an Iron Man, right? He's also going to have his face covered the majority of the time, so it doesn't matter.
He's 57, just so you know.
Mark Ruffalo?
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Did you not know that? I knew he was at least in like his mid 50s, but I was like, let me just double check, because I can't believe she's saying near 50.
No, I was giving that man 8 more years. All right, anyway, that's the other thing to think about, is like, are we going to have a franchise built around a man who is approaching his 60s? And not to say that, I mean, obviously Mark Ruffalo is a great actor, but like Bruce Banner doesn't age that way in the comics. Like, he always stays, much like so many of these characters, he stays at a certain age. Like, he never really goes into his midlife, right? And so are you really going to move forward with Mark Ruffalo as the center of a Hulk franchise now at this stage in his life and career? And if you think about what Mark has been doing and the types of films he's been doing, does Mark even want to do that? Like, he's been, he's a Mickey 17. He did that interesting one with Emma Stone. Like, he's doing really interesting artsy films, and I'm not saying anything about the Marvel Universe here, but at this stage in Mark's career, he can do whatever he wants. He doesn't need the MCU to give him credibility. He already had credibility coming in. Now he's made his millions of dollars off the MCU, and he doesn't necessarily need to do that anymore. Do I think he has a problem with Marvel? No, but do I also think he's like, yay, let me go lead an entire Hulk franchise? Like, maybe not. So that's the other like big variable here is the Professor Hulk of it all and Mark Ruffalo's age and state of his career and where he is. Is he really the right actor to move that forward as an entire franchise?
Honestly, I think you're asking a lot of valid questions that I can't really answer.
I know they're so rhetorical and I apologize.
No, it's fine, but I do think these are questions. I mean, let me just say, I mean, they did just cast like an 82-year-old man to play Red Hulk.
They did. They did. But he's also older in the comics.
I mean, yes, but clearly I feel like they probably don't have that same concern.
Fair.
I don't know. I would like to see Hulk's story play out. I think you've brought a lot of pawns to play with, so it's kind of annoying if it doesn't.
Agreed.
But at the same time, I think you're not wrong in saying, like, at the end of the day, Mark is 57. And how much does he want to keep playing this character? Also, to your earliest point, what the heck are they doing with Hulk?
Yeah.
He's been this weirdo professor version of himself for like 3 or 4 appearances now. I hate it.
Same.
I can't stand it. I mean, I know that's the majority opinion is people are like, are you kidding me? How do you nerf the Hulk? Like, how is that even possible? And it's aggravating. And so I don't really see them being able to even build even a single movie off of him, let alone his own kind of connected trilogy or whatever, if they were to try and do that. Because how do you even do that? How do you do that off of somebody who's like, he's like the Abomination right now where they're like at peace.
Yeah.
And it's like, unless there's a way to, I don't know, have an accident, in which case he is given more gamma radiation or some crap and it like warps him again to make it impossible for him to have the control at the current moment or something of that nature. Like there is physically no way. I mean, I don't even want to sit down and think about the movie that they would try to make with Professor Hulk at the helm. Like it's not worth it to me. So I think as far as in the story, unless they're coming forward, and this might answer both questions, unless they're coming forward and possibly low-key recasting the Hulk during like Secret Wars, and they're coming back with the Incredible Hulk, the angry Hulk that we all know, and it's not Mark Ruffalo anymore, which low-key might be the direction to go, maybe that's it. Maybe that's where we end up. I don't know, but I definitely don't think where one, the characters, and two, where the actor might be, really bodes for telling a bigger Hulk story, even though they seemingly are putting pieces down to tell it. And quite frankly, one, the Hulk himself deserves to have the story told.
Yes.
And two, the only other option would be doing it through She-Hulk, which I know Marvel will not do.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you make such good points. I was kind of having the same general thought process in terms of like, how do we remove these two roadblocks of Professor Hulk and just kind of where Mark is in his career? I think you're right. Secret Wars, though we hate saying it, it is the cure-all for all of their storyline issues. You can use that to really make those changes and it won't feel like it's quite so jarring, quite so unrealistic. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of not realistic stuff, and you're suspending a lot of belief. It's a superhero film, but to a certain extent, the storylines need to make sense. And Secret Wars is a great scapegoat to make a lot of these changes while still being able to keep a coherent storyline going. I do think that is a serious option. I mean, I guess the other option, though I know you're going to hate this, is like, what do we do with his son? And like all of that.
I thought about it and I didn't even want to bring it up.
I do think it's a question. I don't want that to be the answer, but
he seems at peace too.
Yeah.
He was perfectly calm.
Yeah.
Like, I will say, out of everything from this movie, it was refreshing to see a Hulk be angry.
Yeah, like absolutely full of rage. Yes.
Like, I was like, thank God.
Yeah.
Thank you. Because I'm so tired of seeing them at peace. How?
Yeah, it's just not. I mean, look, like, I believe everybody deserves peace. Like, you shouldn't live in this, like, state of, like, self-hatred that he lived in, but that's not who the character is. Like, I'm sorry, that is just, like, the character. That is
the alter
what he
ego.
fights.
That is who Bruce Banner low-key is, but that is not the alter ego of the Hulk.
Yes, correct. Like, that is his inner demon, truly. And that is what he is fighting. His greatest battle is with himself. He will never, ever win that battle. And to have him literally win the battle is just, like, so anticlimactic. And it is a real struggle. So I do hope that, you know, we've talked in the past about how Marvel has been able to take fan feedback and make tweaks and adjustments to make the storylines or the films more enjoyable. I hope that they are taking this feedback that people have had now for years and years and years and saying, like, all right, like maybe that's why they're putting these characters back on the board, because they have the rights and they have this scapegoat in Secret Wars to be able to say, all right, we can do justice by this character. We can undo what we've done by doing XYZ, by recasting, by making him, bringing in a younger guy to really lead the helm and do it in a respectful way, in the same way that they said goodbye to Downey Jr. and the same way that they said goodbye to Evans, and are finding new characters to take on the mantles, but able to still pay homage and be respectful to the character or the actor who made that role what it is, regardless of how you feel about the writing. It's not Mark Ruffalo's fault. Like, he's doing a great job in the role. I think there's a very great opportunity to make that a meaningful send-off and yet set the stage for the next iteration of the Hulk, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, I hate using Secret Wars as a scapegoat, but I feel like that's the only solution, because I don't know how you, again, unless you like accidentally expose him to more gamma radiation. You know what? With the leader still on the board, like, maybe that's possible. Maybe that's the direction we go. I just think then that's going to be like, then why'd we go here if we were just going to end up where we started? Like, it just doesn't make sense. I am intrigued to see the doors that they left open on purpose. I think it makes sense they left them open, but I hope they leave them open for the Hulk.
Yeah.
I love Harrison Ford as Red Hulk. I think he did an amazing job.
Yes.
I think this movie, like I said, well written, between the animosity between the two, everything that's happened between the two, the ability to fill in those blanks of like, where's this man been for all these years? Because, like, wasn't that one of our questions with Abomination? We couldn't figure out where he'd been, and then he suddenly was showing up in like a fight club. Like, things didn't always make sense. They did a great job at filling in those holes, and why we didn't seemingly see him make an appearance before then. But I think the sequel has to be Hulk.
Yes. Yes. I have one final question, and it's just something that I may be misremembering, but I would like to get your POV on it, because I do think it kind of plays into the future of the Red Hulk. So when Sam is explaining to Ross at the end of the film, when he's sitting in the raft, he's talking about, the gamma pills, and it just started building up over years and years and years. Is that something that is then reversible if he stops taking the pills, or does he now need to continue taking the pills just to survive? Because if he stops taking the pills and the gamma, like I would assume it's kind of like, this is my little knowledge of how nuclear atoms work, but like, how they have like half-lives or whatever, and they like slowly, like, the actual radiation like goes away over time. Is that something that will happen to him, that the gamma will slowly leave his body over time as the buildup goes away if he doesn't take the pills?
I'm going to answer your first question with, I think he needs to take the pills for the rest of his life to live.
Then that answers the second question.
Yeah. I think regardless, he has to keep taking the pills. I think he dies otherwise. As for if he were to stop, theoretically, say I'm wrong and like he's fine.
Even like, I guess the other option there is like, the leader was upping the gamma dose on purpose. If there is an iteration of the pills where the gamma dose is small enough that it's not going to cause the buildup, like, what does that mean for the character?
I would think, for the sake of not having to explain the science, I think Marvel would just say it's too late.
Fair.
Like, it's already gone into his body, it's already into his bloodstream, and it's too late. I mean, if you think about how even the leader became the leader, it was blood that had gamma in it just happened to go into a cut he had, and that is how he became what he became.
Well, then they did up his dose.
Well, yes.
Like, they say that, yeah.
But that's how it started.
Yeah.
Now, did he become a full-blown Hulk? No. But he had issues starting. I mean, I still can distinctively remember the scene from The Incredible Hulk of his brain, like, weirdly starting to bubble. Like, we all saw it.
Yeah.
Regardless of the fact that, yeah, the dose was then upped and stuff, that was the initial bit, and it was just because of a blood transfer. Think about what happened to Jen.
Yeah.
Same thing. So, and now granted, hers was a little different because she was quite literally blood related to the Hulk, so, like, that was part of it. But still. So I would think, while I understand there are whole half-lives and all that crap, I would think, for the sake of just making it work for a series in which most people are not going to sit there and say, like, Well, technically, this would whatever. I would just say once it's in a system, it's been in a system. So even if you stop taking the pills, I think it's game over already. I think he's already fully gamified.
That's fair enough. I just had the question coming out of the film. I was thinking about it after, and I was like, that feels like a little bit of a plot hole, but that's okay. I think your explanation makes a lot of sense. We need to just simplify it because I personally don't want to dig that deep into it, so I would assume much of the audience also is fine taking it at face value, and I think we can leave it. But I did want to ask the question because I was like, it's lingering there.
Yeah, that's fair. I do think I kind of questioned it for a second. Then I was like, I just assume this is a permanent problem. So,
Which is a fair assumption, I feel like. So I think we've kind of covered everything that we wanted to around the Hulks in Brave New World. There's a lot of question marks, I think, around Hulk related characters and the Hulk franchise. Maybe we'll get some more answers in the next, year or so as we get more information on the slate. Maybe we'll get more answers after Secret Wars. But hopefully, moral of the story, we get more Hulk storylines that are akin to what we see in the comics in the future, because now that we have more characters back on the board more prominently, we have a lot of really interesting ingredients for a cool Hulk related recipe. That's kind of the thesis here of our Hulk episode. If you are enjoying our coverage of Brave New World or the things that we're going to dive into in the future, please make sure that you are following on your podcast platform of choice. Check out the website. It's got our calendar, which is also great for just understanding what's upcoming in terms of episodes. And last but not least, if you are a fan of the show and you want to help support us, you can buy us a coffee at our link located in the show notes.
you guys can also follow us on all of our socials, which are linked in the show notes below. And unfortunately, this concludes our coverage of Captain America Brave New World, primarily because we are butting right up into Daredevil Born Again. And I know Taylor's very excited for this. I am as well. So next week is predictions already, believe it or not, because the week after we are getting I actually think it's episode 1 and 2 are dropping together that first week. So keep that in mind for all of you who need to watch both episodes or want to watch both episodes. There will, I believe, be 2. That being said, join us next week as we're beginning our Daredevil era, which is going to last us for like the next 3 months, which is awesome, but also a little stressful for us.
It's
but
fine.
No worries. We're still excited. And as always, Marvel just blew your mind. So let's talk about it.